Hey guys, this is going to be a quick video to show you how to implement joystick controls into your mobile games using Touch Input Manager. So I've got an empty project here and I've imported Touch Input Manager. It's the newest version on the Asset Store, which is version 2. Now to access it, we'll go on the window, Touch Input Manager, and you've got these two buttons here. Now Touch Input Manager is split into two parts. Okay, you've got the input editor and the layout editor. The input editor is where you create your joysticks, your buttons, you customize how they look, you define their animations. This is you're sort of constructing your buttons and joysticks, and putting them into this basket. Your layout editor is it defines the layout of the screen and where those buttons and joysticks go on the screen. Okay, they're sort of like different scene. If touch controls had a scene, like you have a Unity scene, the layout would be your scene, and the joysticks and keyboard joysticks and buttons in the input editor would be your scene objects. That's basically all there is to it. Okay, so to start, you need to create a joystick. So to do that, you click create and choose joystick. Okay, your first joystick is created. You can start using it like this, but we're gonna edit some of the fields and show you what they mean. Okay, now the name is purely for your reference. I'll name this test joystick. Okay, just hit rename. You've got some options. You can see the preview of the joystick immediately. Okay, this is going to look exactly how it's going to look in the game, so you can play around when you play around with the animations and whatnot. You get the result immediately, and you can see what the changes are going to look like in the game. We've got some options to lock X and Y axes. So at the moment it's free. You can move it any which way. If you lock an X axis, you can only go up and down. Lock the Y axis, only left and right. So for our purpose, we're going to need both of them on. Okay. You got the centering option. So you can either choose not to center, so the joystick will stay wherever your finger press it last. You've got the option to snap back to the center. Okay, and you've got an option to smoothly move back to the center. Make sure you set the speed to something other than 0. Okay, you can see how it smoothly goes back to the center to where it was. It's a little less distracting than snapping. I'm gonna stick with don't center, so it just sticks to wherever the player presses. Now you've got your animations too, and I'll go into more of this in another video. This will be a whole section on its own. So for joysticks, that's all there is to it. That's the basics, and that's all you need to do to define the joystick. Now again, remember, these are sort of like our game objects or prefabs for our joysticks. Okay, we now need to put them into a scene or a touch layout to make use of them. Okay, so we begin by creating a new layout. There's layout, and we'll call this one our test layout. And we want to add a joystick into our layout. Okay, this area is a representation of the screen. This is what it's going to look like overlaid onto your game. Right now there's nothing there, so we drag the test joystick from our input manager into this area for the in the layout manager. You drop it, and you'll get your little box that represents the joysticks on screen. Okay, now you can move it around by holding this bar here. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the corner and stretch it so it covers the entire half of the screen. So this means if this was our screen, or more accurately, if we had a Galaxy S3 or something, our screen would be more like this. This shows that the bottom half of the screen, regardless of where the player presses, will respond. The joystick that we've added to the scene will respond to it. So if I click here, this joystick will snap to my finger, and I can start playing around with it. If I was to do this, then only when the player presses on the left half of the screen, left bottom half of the screen, that's only when the joystick will respond to him. Otherwise, no response. Okay, so we're going to cover the entire bottom half of the screen with this. Okay, and this is relative to the screen size. Yeah, it works in percentages. So this is sort of like 50% of the height and 100% of the width. So if my screen size changes, or if the player goes into portrait mode, it will look a bit like this. Okay, where it'll be long ways. It handles all that for you, so you don't have to worry about different screen orientations or different screen sizes. It's all just done under the hood. Now, you need to create an ID for each of your elements, and the ID is used to access the layouts and the joysticks and the buttons through code. Okay, the IDs for the layouts have to be unique between all the layouts. The IDs for the joysticks have to be unique within that layout. Okay, so we're going to call this one our my first layout. Oops. Okay, and you'll see a little green light telling you that the name is valid. If I had another layout with the ID of my first layout, then you'll get a red light saying there's a problem. So just make sure that you've entered a valid name that contains no special characters, and that the name is in fact unique. Okay, so for joystick, we'll call this the movement joystick. Okay, because we're going to be using it to move a ball around the scene. Now, once you've got green lights and everything, you need to build these IDs so they're accessible to your code. Okay, and you can do that by pressing this button up here. Okay, it'll show you a little red light if your IDs are outdated. So in our case, we've just added new IDs, so obviously they're outdated. We haven't built since the last time, so we're going to hit build. Okay, it'll tell you it's compiling, and when it's done, you'll see a little green light. That means everything's up to date and all your changes are ready to go. Okay, if I was to make a change now, for example, movement joystick as my ID, you'll see that it's a green light because it's a valid name, but now we need to rebuild our IDs because we've just changed the IDs. If we revert it back to what it was, it gives us a little green light again because nothing's changed. Okay, so now that we've got a joystick in our layout, we can go ahead and access this joystick through code and make an object move around the scene. Okay, so I'm going to close these two windows. I'm going to create a quick scene. I'm going to create a floor. I'm going to create a ball that we can roll around. Okay, so we're going to add a rigid body to this ball, and we're going to add a quick directional light. So now when we hit play, the ball should just fall down and stop. Yeah, and we'll just fix the camera up as well, so that the player can see what they're doing. Not going to be an exciting game, but it will show you all you need to know. These aren't centered for some reason. That's odd. Okay. Get this guy closer. And that's good enough, I think. Okay, so we're going to create a script to roll this ball around the scene using the joystick input. Okay. So firstly, we're going to create a new C# script. We'll call this one roll around. Open that script up. And I'll make this bigger for you guys. Now, first thing we need to do is we need to tell Touch Input Manager whether it should render or pass input to a layout. By default, when we run the game, you won't see any joysticks on the screen or anything like that. Touch Input Manager is working right now, but it's not displaying anything because you haven't asked for it to show anything. Okay, we have to toggle on our different layouts through code. So in the start function for this script, we'll go Touch Input Manager dot pass input to layout. So this function tells Touch Input Manager that we want to begin passing input to a layout. Okay, or we can set it to false and stop passing input to a layout. So we'll do our layout ID. We'll start writing layout ID. It'll suggest my first layout because that's the only layout we've got, and again that's what we defined in the input editor. So we enter that, and that tells Touch Input Manager that we want to pass input to that layout we defined in the editor. We say true because we do want to pass input to it. Secondly, exact same thing, but there's a function called render layout, and this tells Touch Input Manager whether it should render a layout or not. You can pass input to a layout, so a joystick would be working in the background, and you don't necessarily have to render it, but generally when you're using Touch Input Manager you want to do both. Okay, so we want to pass the input and render it true. You only have to do this once. Okay, and say for example this was our main character in the game. Okay, and when the game starts and he's enabled, the layouts will start rendering and receiving input, and when he's destroyed, we can stop rendering those layouts because we don't need it anymore. Okay, it's only for the main character, and this is just an example, right? You can also turn off any layouts that have to do with in-game. You can turn them off when you exit the game, back to the menu, and then you could enable like a menu layout, for example. That's just some of the stuff you can do with it. So we'll leave this like this. Next thing we're going to do is roll the ball around with input from the joystick. Yeah. So we'll get the input from the joystick. Joystick input equals Touch Input Manager get joystick. Okay. Enter that. So now it's asking us for a joystick ID. Okay. The ID of our joystick is movement. Okay, and that's that. And now it's asking for the layout in which that ID resides in. Okay. And that layout of course is our first layout. And an optional parameter is whether you want to normalize the input or not. In our case, we don't want to normalize the input. Okay. So now this vector2 will contain the input for the joystick for that frame. Yeah. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move the ball around with that input. So we're going to say, we're going to add force to the ball. We're going to add the value we got from the joystick. We're going to add that as a force to the ball. Now I'm putting the Y in the Z axis because we don't have a 2D game, we have a 3D game, and our up is our Z axis. Okay, so I just put this code in, and that should push the ball around the way. This should push the ball around the way the player moves the joystick. We're going to multiply that by a speed variable, so we can adjust the speed of the ball. Okay, and that's all you need to do. So we're going to hit save. Can I go back to our scene? We'll add this script to our ball. Oops. We'll hit play and we'll see what happens. So here's our joystick in the center. Okay, we can interact with it. It's drawing and getting input because we had specified that it should. Now when we press down and move, you can see the ball responds to the joystick. Pretty sluggish because, well, it's not exactly supposed to be a really fun game, but you can see it working, right? We're going to increase the speed, make it 5. Oh, we fell off. So we'll make the speed 5, see how that looks. That's a bit better. Okay, and that's all there is to it. This will work. You can build this straight to an Android device or an iPhone device and it will just work just fine. Okay. And now as before, if we were to delete our player object, his onDestroy script will get called. His onDestroy function will get called, sorry, which will hide our touch input layout. Okay. Because we don't want it to display anymore once the player is dead, since there's no point of having a joystick on the screen. So we're going to try that now. We're going to delete the player. And it's gone. Okay. And that's all there is to it. This video was a lot bigger than I wanted it to be, but I needed to cover some ground information between, you know, what the layout editor is and the input editor is. The next few videos should be fairly simple compared to this one. And I hope this helps. And enjoy using Touch Input Manager.